let's make a portfolio website. Now, you could go out in the world and just write raw HTML and CSS and all of that stuff in order to build your portfolio website. Wonderful. Might actually be simpler that way. But what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be using a build system, which is a set of tools that kind of work together to potentially make building a website or a portfolio site or any kind of site a little bit easier. For example, Final version 2 True Final, henceforth known as Final, will allow you to import AI to HTML exports very easily. It will allow you to edit all of your stories on Google Docs, things like that, so you don't have to write raw HTML. But if you want the experience of writing raw HTML, that's fine. Just skip this video, DIY it. But if you want to get a little wild, try out a build system, let's do it. So what we're going to do is we are going to be making a portfolio website that features a few different kinds of pages on it. Normal static pages like your contact page, pages that have D3 on them, svelte pages, pages with AI to HTML, data wrapper, pages imported from Google Docs, all kinds of stuff. And so in order to do that, you need to use this tool here. Now, this is a template repository, which means we can make a copy of it into our own repo. So what you're going to do is click Use this template. Now, for the name of the repository, one of the magic things about GitHub is if you give your repository a certain special name, it will show up as your GitHub website. That is username.github.io. Now in this case, I've already made a jsoma.github.io. Let's see if it works. Yeah, there we go. So I made this awful website here. It lives at jsoma.github.io. I don't want it there. I don't want it to live there. I want to replace it with this new website. So what you need to do, if the repository already exists, if it doesn't already exist, you're fine. But if it does already exist, you need to go to the repo, the whatever.github.io. That's your username right there. Click Settings, and then you're going to rename it. So I'm just going to throw -old on the end of my jsoma.github.io. I'm going to click Rename. Great. So I now no longer have a jsoma.github.io repo. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to, backspace and type O again just to refresh it. And now it says, yes, it is available. Going to leave it public, going to include all branches, why not? Create repository from template. So what will happen now is all the contents from the final repo are going to be copied on over here. Now, what do we want to do with this? We want to edit it to add our own content to it. So we're going to move it to our computer so we can make changes on our own machine. Now, we're going to be using GitHub Desktop for this, which I know not everybody loves. If you want to work from the command line, that's fine too. So I'm going to click Code, and I'm going to click Open with GitHub Desktop. Where do I want to save this? Well, my local path is, I save all this stuff in the development folder. So it's going to save in github.com, jsoma.github.io. It's going to copy that to users, soma, development, jsoma.github.io. Clone. So what that has done is it has taken all of the contents from this repo right here and moved it to my local machine. So let's take a look at what we've got. So the first thing to notice is package.json. Anytime you see a package.json file, you know this is not a Python project. This is a Node.js or JavaScript on the command line project, which means if you don't have Node.js installed, you're going to need to install Node.js. I'll leave some links in the details of the video, description of the video that you can go to. You can probably just do brew install node, honestly, if you're on a Mac. But whatever. So install Node if you don't have Node installed. Now, the way that these projects work, one of these Node projects, is that there are many, many things that are required to run this project. Something called Handlebars, a bunch of things called Parcel. And in order to install all of those things, we need to run a certain command. So I'm going to open up the terminal here by going View, Terminal. And it will automatically open up a terminal for me that is in this folder. If you wanted to pop over to your terminal and CD on over to it, that would be fine too. Now the command we're going to run is npm install. npm stands for Node Package Manager. That's like pip for Node. And it just says, hey, install all of the things that we need for this project. Gives us a nice little progress bar there. It scrolls down, 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 down. It yells at us a lot. It yells that we're using an old version of Parcel. All this stuff is old. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're going to be fine. We don't have to worry about outdated versions because we're just running this stuff on our computer instead of putting it up in the cloud and letting other people run things on it. Okay, well that was pretty boring. It didn't really seem to do anything. But what we can do now is npm run start. If we look at this package.json file, it shows us a few different things we can run. npm run start, npm run build, npm run test. npm run test just shows up by default. It's not going to do anything for us because we don't have any tests installed. But build is eventually going to run our final version of the website, and start is what we use to kind of play around with the site as we're working on it. So npm run start down here, I'm going to hit enter. So when we run npm run start, it opens up a web page that is incredibly ugly and lives on our computer at localhost 1234. So what's happening here is we have a bunch of code here that does a bunch of magic stuff. It combines JavaScript files and CSS and does all kinds of things. And the magic behind all of this is something called Parcel. Parcel is a web application bundler. It's usually used for more technical projects, but we're making it work here instead. It just kind of turns content that is organized a certain way into a nice, usable, modern-day website. So what's happening here is when we run npm run start, it's telling Parcel to go look inside of the content folder and then do something with index.html. So if we open up the content folder, we will see index.html. So index.html here, it's just a normal web page, you know, got your HTML tag. Maybe we could use a doc type up there. Has a title, a name, I am who I am, etc. So we could change this and I could say, hi, I'm Soma. And I could throw my email address in here, jonathансoma@gmail.com. I could throw in my Twitter here, Danger Scarf. Save that. Then I can head back here, look at my portfolio, refresh, and there you go. The changes have happened. I'll probably also want to change this title up here as well. Instead of saying my portfolio, it should probably say, you know, Jonathan Soma's portfolio or Jonathan Soma home or something like that. And I refresh, looking great. Now, honestly, this page is pretty ugly. Maybe we'll come back and style it later. No, maybe we'll come back and style it now. Let's do this. So if we want to style it, we need to add, let's come back and do it. Let's come back and do it later. It'll be fine. We'll survive. Everything will be great. Now, what we want to do is we want to add some projects to this site because we've been working on projects. We're going to add links to the projects down here, but the very first thing we need to do is actually add some projects. Funnily enough, I have a project all ready for me. It's this nice D3 scales here where I got, you know, a chart and some highlighted stuff and some colored stuff, and everything's going to be great about it. So if I have this D3 project that I made, how do I incorporate it into this website? Well, we're going to look at two different places. First, we're going to go to our .github.io folder. We're going to go into content. Right now, there's one file, index.html, which we're looking at here. There's a style folder and a partials folder, which we'll get back to later. But then, if we go back to wherever our D3 folder is, so it's this code right here, D3 do your magic, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to make a new folder for this, and I'm going to call it, let's say, D3 scatter, because why not? And inside of D3 scatter, I'm going to copy all the files that I need in order to make this page right here. Pretty simple so far. Just lives in there. Everything's fine. I'm going to go back to my index.html, and I'm going to link it. I'm going to make maybe an h3 tag, and I'm going to say, go into D3 scatter and find index.html, because that's the name of the file there. And we'll call this a sample scatter plot in D3 from class. We'll save it. We'll head back here, go to the portfolio, refresh, click it, works great. Works like magic. Amazing. I've never been so excited. Let's add a second D3 project. If I go back, I have another one in part 2 where I get to change these guys up here, and I say, okay, I'm going to add this project as well. I'm going to call this D3 Force. I'm going to open it up, and I'm once again just going to add all of the files I need for D3 Force into there, making sure it has an index.html. Going to go back to my portfolio, going to go back to the home page, just going to add a link to it. I'm going to say, okay, I want to go to D3 Force, the sample interactive force diagram in D3 from class. Go back here, refresh, and there we go. Easy peasy, everything's good as long as we're working with D3. Now, a problem that we're going to have is when people go to these sub pages, to this page or to this page, how do they go back? How do they go back? How do I click? Is there a back button here? Is there a back button here? No, there's no back button here. So the problem is if I want to go back to the home page, either I have to hit back or the user's going to have to do a little delete like that, which we don't want that to happen. No one wants to do that. So fun story. This is not actually just HTML. So when we installed Parcel, when we said, hey, Parcel, you're going to do fancy web stuff to this HTML page, what we did was we said, hey, along with all this HTML stuff, I want you to actually use something called Handlebars too. And what Handlebars does is Handlebars is a system, a templating system, where you can use variables in your code, which is fine. Maybe we'll use some of those later. But more importantly is we can use things called partials, which is code that we can reuse again and again without typing it all out again. So in this folder here called partials, I have something called navbar.hbs. HBS is short for handlebars. And what this file is, this navbar.hbs, is it's reusable code that if we say, hey, put the navbar on this page, Parcel will inject it into the HTML and throw all this code on there. This code isn't very complicated. It's a div ID navbar, a link to home, which goes back to our home page, and then a little bit of style here to change up how the page looks. So let's see what happens if we want to use one of these reusable partials. So I'm going to go back here, I'm going to click on the scatter plot, and I'm going to add this navbar up at the top of D3 scatter index.html. So I open up D3 scatter, index.html, I go down under body, and the way to use a partial is like this, and it's called navbar. So these two curly braces, greater than sign, and then navbar. A little space under that. Save it, refresh, and then magically this code shows up on this page. We didn't have to write all of that code out, right? We just had to say, hey, include this partial here, this little chunk of code in my index. So now I can click home here, go back home. I can go to the sample interactive force diagram. Oh, hey, we need something at the top there. So I'm going to go into D3 force. I'm going to open up index. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to paste in navbar there. I'll save it. I'll come back, I'll refresh, and there it is hiding at the top. It doesn't go all the way across. That's because I put it inside of the container here. So it goes inside of whatever you put it. I could put this down at the bottom of the page if I wanted, honestly. Throw it down at the bottom. Bam, it exists down at the bottom. We probably want to put this at the very, very top, just after body. And there we go. These pages both have something at the top that say home. Now the reason why this is so useful is, let's say we want to change the style of this, change the color of this, change the text of this. I don't have to edit both this scatter page and this force page. All I need to do is go to partials, navbar, and then change it. Let's say I don't want it to have that pink background, and I want it to say my name. You're looking at Soma's page. And then I'll change this to say, go back home. Back, back. And so it just makes life a lot easier if you're just able to edit these things in one place instead of putting them on every single page. Now you could also do something like this and you say, look, I really love this content right here, even though it's pretty screwed up. I want to put a footer on this page. I want to put a footer down at the bottom that says something like, hey, this is copyright me. This is copyright me today. So what we can do is in partials, I'll make a new file and I'll call it footer, or I'll call it copyright footer.hbs. And I'll just add a little p tag, a little div, class equals footer, and I'll say copyright 2021 Jonathan Soma. I'll add a little bit of a style to it. I'll say text align center, maybe throw a little margin on the top of that. I can refresh, it's not going to show up here because I haven't included it. But then if I go back to D3 scatter and D3 force and go down to the bottom and say okay, after this final div gets closed, I could put it before or after this JavaScript, no big deal. I just say, hey, add the copyright footer here. Let's see, this one is force. So I'll go back, go to force, and look at that. Copyright Jonathan Soma down at the bottom. I'll also add that to my scatter. All right, there we go. It's hiding down at the bottom. Now remember, this is not HTML. This is Handlebars. This is another special tool that kind of sits on top of HTML thanks to our build tool, Parcel. So Parcel knows, hey, even though this says .html, it's actually a Handlebars file. So what we need to do is add a bunch of stuff to it in order to turn it into HTML, in order to grab this partial and inject it there and all of that stuff. When we look at this page right here, at localhost 1234, we're actually not looking at the content files that we're editing. If you see this .dist folder, this is actually the folder that we're browsing right here. So there is an index. There is a D3 scatter, D3 force, same indexes. But if you look at this index in D3 force, you'll see it says, hey, it's got a navbar here. Hey, it has a footer down here. Same thing with the D3 scatter. It has a nav bar up top, and it has the code for the footer down at the bottom. So inside of this dist folder, this is what's called our compiled code. It's our code after Parcel has done everything it's going to do to it. It also does weird things like renames all of our files. We now have like d3-nyt.blah-blah-blah.js. Same thing with that d3 file right there. And it'll automatically inject the names of those files in there. And it's wild and crazy, but you know, it's fine. It does what it does. So just know that later on it's going to be important where this compiled version is saved, because that's the version that we want to actually put up on GitHub pages. Okay, so we have covered partials. Now let's move along. Let's move along to adding a page that is a Google Docs page. How about that? So let's say I have some code, a story that I wrote. Close your eyes for a second. Let's say I have a story that I wrote and it's on Google Docs. And it's on Google Docs right here. Now, this is formatted in a kind of interesting way. When it says headline, colon, author, colon, kicker, colon, all of these things. And then later on it says content, colon, and then colon, end, and these are all highlighted. This is a specific way of formatting data called ArchieML. It came out of the New York Times, and it was a way to kind of not force people who are editing content to either, you know, you use WordPress or something like that, or to edit HTML. Because in theory, if I have this scatter plot page right here, and I wanted to change something on it, or someone else wanted to change something on it, I would have to go to d3 scatter, index.html, and then change this HTML code here. Not everyone is comfortable with changing HTML. Not everybody knows how it works. So a lot of times you'll use a content management system like WordPress or something like that to do your edits. Now, if what you're editing, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of versioning, all kinds of crazy things going on, a lot of newsrooms rely on Google Docs, and then they export from Google Docs into their content management system. But what if Google Docs just was your content management system? What if I could just pull data straight from here, and I could say, hey, here's my headline, here's my author, here's my pitch, here's my data sets, here's my GitHub repo, my content, all of these things. Just make it a web page. Just make it a web page. And that is one of the things that Parcel is going to do for us. I wrote a plugin for it that is called gdocs ArchieML, which will pull in data automatically from Google Docs in order to create a web page. So instead of having to type out all this code here, we just say pull it from right here. Now, the way we're going to do that is we're going to make a folder, and I'm going to call this, what's this? Let's call this story about nothing. No, story about something, right? I'm going to make a new folder inside of content, and I'm going to call this, let's say gdocs story. No, story about something. Why not? Now, in the same way that .html means this is an HTML file, even though it also supports handlebars, and .hbs means this is a handlebars file, I am going to make a new file in this folder called index.gdoc. Index.gdoc is what I decided we should be calling these files that are populated from Google Docs. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put code that looks like this in it. We say, hey, I'm going to get rid of this page header and this page footer for right now. So I'm going to say, hey, here's what I want the title of the page to be. Here's what I want the Google Doc to be. On the top and bottom of these, dash, 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 dash. These act like variables. It's something called front matter. And technically speaking, this is actually also a handlebars file, even though it says gdoc. So let's just see what's going on here. Let's see why I set it up like this. I'm going to hit save. I need to link it from the home page as well. So I'm going to go back to my home page, and I'm going to say h3 ahref equals, what is this called? Story about something index.gdoc. You have to make sure the file name here matches the file name you saved there. And I'm going to call this a story about something from Google Docs. I'm going to save it, and it's going to yell, and it's going to say, no, there's no such file there. And I say, oh, sorry, I spelled it wrong. Sorry. About. Save. Building, built in 1.1 second. Great. I'm going to go back to my website, go back home, and there you go. A story about something from Google Docs. I'm going to click it. Look at that. Look at that. It's got some text here. It's got these nice data wrapper things. What's going on here? Well, if you look at this page here, if you go down to where it says content, so content stuff goes here, content stuff goes here. Anything you type in here will show up on your Google Doc. Type here will show up, not on your Google Doc, on your web page. And so I save this. If I resave my gdoc file here, my server parcel will automatically rebuild it, and then I can refresh. And there we go. We see it's going good. It's going good. Now, a magic thing about this ArchieML gdocs plugin is that if you put in a link to a data wrapper chart inside of here, which just, it's just this link to a chart that looks like this. It's not embed code. It's none of that stuff. It will automatically turn it into an embedded data wrapper chart. So if you have a data wrapper chart and you want to put it in a story, all you have to do is link it. If you have other kinds of images, things like that, you can just cut and paste them in here. Here, let me find a picture of a cat. We'll say, hey cat, what's happening? Take a little screenshot of that cat. I'll paste it right here. Save this to make sure it rebuilds. Rebuild. I'll refresh. And then that image is automatically shown up in my web page. So all you need to do is cut and paste images, and all you need to do is paste in data wrapper links in order to get, data wrapper embeds and images on here. Fun, right? The only problem being that this is pretty ugly. It's pretty ugly. It's not very good. We probably want it to change. So remember in the past, in the far, 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 far past, where when we did D3 force and D3 scatter, we said, hey, I want to add a nav bar. I want to add a copyright footer. I want to add a little chunk of code to each one of these pages so that I don't have to edit things again and again and again. Well, I'm going to assume that every single one of these Google Doc pages are going to kind of look the same, right? So instead of just having little bits and pieces that we can reuse, I have created page header and page footer in this partials folder. And so page header starts a new page, does a bunch of stuff, does a bunch of other stuff, puts styles in, whatever. We got a page footer here, does a bunch of other stuff. All I need to do to put this at the end of my file and this at the beginning of my file is just say, hey, use the page header. Hey, use the page footer. I'm going to refresh, it's going to rebuild it, and it's going to throw those partials on the top and on the bottom in order to make this look perfect. Now, does this look perfect? No, this is going outside of the area that it should be going into. I'm going to have to investigate why that is happening, but otherwise, it's totally fine. Now, the way that this works is this works through handlebars. It works through front matter, which are these variables here, and it works through ArchieML, which is this code right here. So the ArchieML is the fact that we have something and then a colon and then some other stuff, something, a colon, something else. This says there is a variable called headline, and it is going to be story about something. There's a variable called author, and it's going to be Jonathan Soma. There's a kicker called here we go, and that's what it's going to be? Here we go. And then there is content that is everything from this content here to the end that is right there. Now the way that Handlebars works, besides just doing partials, it's all about variables. We have a variable called title. We have a variable called gdoc. I could put my variable called title right here by doing 2 curly braces, 2 curly braces. I could put my gdoc one here as well. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to wait for it to rebuild, and then I'm going to refresh here. And then ta-da! This is a sample project. That's my title, right? That's my title. And that's my gdoc right here. That's my gdoc. So the way that this page header works, this page header that says here we go, that says story about something, that says Jonathan Soma, all this information that got pulled from here is if we go look at pageheader.hbs, it has all these variables in it. It says, hey, put the kicker in here, put the headline in here, put the author in here. But only if the author exists, then that's the end of it. So this is the whole block. If the author exists, put the author in here. If the publish date exists, put the publish date in there. You know, put an intro in there if there is an intro. This information is pulled from 2 places. It's pulled from the ArchieML from the website right here that we said our Google Doc is pointed to, and then it's also pulling from this information here. So if you want to change the kind of things that go on your web page, all you need to do is change pageheader.hbs and say, hey, you know, whatever. If I don't like the kicker anymore, I can just delete kicker here, and then there will never be a kicker on one of these pages again. And the thing is, if we add multiple Google Doc pages to this, they will all be edited at the same time by us editing pageheader.hbs and pagefooter.hbs. If we say, put the page header on here, put the page footer on there. So let's say we want to create another one of these. I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this another gdoc story. I'm going to go into my files over here because I know I have another one. Let's see, story about something, another gdoc story, new file, and I'm going to call this index.gdoc. You always want these to be called index.gdoc, index.html, things like that, because that's just what you call web files, to be honest with you. This is pulling from here. You know, I stole this from a student. Same kind of deal, a little fancier, has tables, has different headers, stuff like that. Still has some data wrapper stuff down at the bottom. Page header, page footer, and then this processed content. The processed content is the variable that is all the content in here with like images put in and the data wrapper embeds put in and stuff like that. It has 3 curly braces because it has HTML in it. Otherwise, it won't actually print out HTML in the final form. So save this, add a link to it from my home page, h3, a href, another gdoc story, index.gdoc, second story from Google Docs that I stole from Kate. Save it. Take some time to build. It is now done building. Go back to my home page, refresh. And there we go. We get we got maps, we got all kinds of stuff. We got some stuff down at the bottom. Now you'll need to kind of pay attention to what's going on in this, let's say the footer HTML. This is the methodology, and it kind of pulls the information out and styles it in certain ways. You know, we got an introduction, things like that. But if there are certain things that you want to appear differently, you can always just edit the styles. If we look at partials, we look at pagefooter.hbs, sorry, page header, we see that it is pulling from style page.css. So if we want to edit the styles that apply to these pages, we could open up style page.css and change whatever we want inside of here. What else do we need here? I mean, this is most everything. All other kinds of things that don't come from Google Docs, you pretty much just cut and paste in there. So for example, something as complicated as 3D scrollytelling. I have some 3D scrollytelling here. It's got a spaceship, it's got all kinds of stuff. I'm going to copy. I'm just going to paste that right on into the content folder there. 3D scrollytelling, I'm going to add a link to it. I'm going to say, hey, ahref 3D scrollytelling index.html. Save it, refresh this page, and there we go. We got that story right there. And we say, oh no, we need that little thing at the top, right? We need that little header that says we can go back. No problem, no problem. Just that nav bar, right? If you remember what we did in D3 Force, it says, oh, just put the nav bar there. Hey, let's do it. D3 scrollytelling, go to index, go to the beginning of the body tag, throw that nav bar in there, refresh the page, and then magically it's there. We could also add it to our Google Docs pages. I don't actually know how well that's going to go there, but we'll see what happens. I'm going to my page header, just inside of the body tag here. I'm going to throw that nav bar in there. I'm going to refresh. Oh, that doesn't look bad. There we go. And so now it ends up being on all of these pages, so I always know that I can go back, whatever's going on here. Whichever kind of page I go to, so long as I put that, hey, you know, this is what's happening, we're good to go. What else can we do? What else can we do? Okay, I did something stupid. I made this whole video and I forgot to talk about the most important part of this, which is AI2html. So AI2html is a tool that is used by pretty much every newsroom that has ever been invented to make good graphics. The idea behind AI2html is it allows you to make graphics that have selectable text that are also resizable easily, good for responsive design, all kinds of stuff. I've made a few videos about AI2html. I'll link them below if you want to learn a little bit more about it, which you should. Now, the most important thing about AI2html is every single time you use AI2html, it spits out a bunch of files, and it looks like this. So what this is supposed to be is it's supposed to be a web page that has one graphic, and the size of the graphic depends on the size of the screen. So as you make the screen smaller, it starts off with the full size, moves the laptop, and then at the smallest size of your screen, it shows you the mobile version. Now, the problem with this is that when you export this from Illustrator, it's just this random file, and it just has some style stuff in it, and it has these 3 different images, and like in order to get this into your web page, normally what you have to do is copy and paste all of this HTML. So for example, let's say I wanted to add on to my website, and I wanted to say, hey, I'm going to make some sort of AI2html piece here. So I'm going to open up content, and I'm going to say new folder, AI2html sample. I'm going to call it index.html. I'm going to give it a headline, and I'm going to say this is a sample for, I don't know, AI2html. I guess it doesn't matter because I'm not actually using a template here, so I don't need to use the headline, but whatever. So anyway, let's say I save this file. This is my sample. Text. Actually, I'll make this say blah, 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 because I use the word text a lot later. So here's some text, here's some text. It's just a normal HTML file, let's say. Save it, link it from here. Say, okay, 3D scrollytelling, nope. I'm going to say AI2html sample. This is a sample of using AI2html helpers. So the magic here is if I look at this page, refresh, look at this page, just blah, 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 you know, nothing wild. If I wanted to add the AI2html stuff into it, what I would need to do is copy all 3 of these files into ai2html sample, and then copy and paste all of this code just like into the middle here or wherever. And the awful thing about this is it makes your code really unmaintainable, right? Like, it's so big, it takes up so much space. How do I know where the bottom of it is if I'm doing multiple ai2htmls? It's awful, it's terrible. So what we're going to do instead is I wrote a helper for Handlebars. And what a helper does, it's a little bit of extra code that does something. And what this one does, it's called ai2html because it takes, here, let's just show you how it works. It takes this stuff here, which is just the default from Illustrator, just the default export. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to throw it into ai2html sample. So I got my text.html, text laptop, medium, mobile, and I'm just going to say, hey, include the ai2html file called text here. I'm going to save it. And after it builds, we can refresh, and there we go. It has imported them successfully. And not just the big size, but also the small size and all the other sizes if I could resize my screen small enough. So the idea is, instead of having to cut and paste all of that code in there, it gets magically generated by that little helper right here. It automatically throws together the code for you. It does its best. You might have some problems with some file names or things like that, but just hit me up if you get a problem. Now the other fun thing is, unlike a lot of other stuff that happens, if you type something that is an incorrect name, refresh, it'll tell you, hey, here's the folder I'm looking in, content, ai2html sample, and I can't find texty.html. So it'll give you a little bit of a warning if you do something wrong, but hopefully everything you do is perfect and correct. That's about it. That is about it. That is how you add almost every kind of page to it. I don't think I have anything else that's crazy. For Svelte, you just add, yeah, same thing. Yeah. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We need to build this. We need to actually put this on the internet. Because now that we've run our server down here, OPS, if you Control-C, you'll quit your server, and then this won't work anymore. So again, npm run start, Parcel will start everything up for you, and then you can look at things and everything's good. So what we are going to do is we're going to Control-C, Control-C, Control-C. When we were running this code, when we ran npm run start, it put all of this temporary stuff inside of dist to just like fool around with it and just like see what's happening and rename everything all crazy and all that kind of stuff. So there's another command though, and that is npm run build. And what npm run build is it's going to put it in the docs directory instead of putting it in the period dist directory. And that's going to matter in a second. So I have no errors here. Everything's looking good. npm run build, and it goes 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 and it goes, and it's done. It's a nice little cute printing. Everything's doing good here. What I need to do now is send it up to GitHub. So GitHub desktop, I look at it and it says, here's all the stuff you've changed. So it says you've changed a bunch of stuff in content, you've changed a bunch of stuff in docs or added things to docs. There's another folder that got added, another few actually. So node modules, which is all of the extra plugins that got added whenever we added these dependencies, whenever we installed them, that does not end up going onto GitHub. And this cache folder, which is just a bunch of crazy parcel stuff, dist does not go up to GitHub, just the changes to docs and the changes to content. So I'm going to say updating my website, because why not? Commit to main, push, sends it all up to the web. Great. Now it all lives up on GitHub. If I go back to GitHub, let's see, github.com, jsoma. Right. So what I need to do now is I need to publish this as a website, because right now it's just a repo. Now, remember that all of the completed compiled HTML and all of that went into the docs folder here, right? So this index file here, oh, it looks crazy. It's all in one line. Everything's wild. We didn't write that. That is what Parcel did for us. So this is the stuff that we want, the stuff inside of docs. So I'm going to click Settings. And then I'm going to scroll down, 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 down. Hey, look, I didn't know. It moved. It just moved. GitHub Pages. Pages now moved to its own dedicated tab. Check it out here. Great. I want to check it there, but let me just see. Where's that tab at? I have no idea where that tab lives. Oh, Pages right here. Great. Oh, so it automatically publishes it at jsoma.github.io. But the problem is, all of our content actually lives inside of the docs directory. So we need to select from this drop down here, main branch, sure, that just means our normal code. Select docs and then hit save. Now we're going to wait a few moments for this to start working. I'll just keep refreshing again and again and again. So one thing that's happening, or one thing that you might be unhappy about, is the fact that every single time before we push it up, we have to run npm run build. Can't that be something that someone else takes care of? And the answer is yes. One of the things that we can do is we can use GitHub Actions in order to make sure that our website is published correctly. This is so sad. Where's our website? I'm waiting forever here, waiting forever. So when you update a page, the amount of time that it takes to update varies. It can take everywhere from 5 seconds to 15 minutes, which is why it's kind of irritating that it didn't happen in 5 seconds this time. There we go. So I did shift enter or shift refresh, and it refreshed nice and fast. And then here we go. We got our scatter plot, works great. We got something from Google Docs, works great. We got a 3D scrollytelling story, that also works great. So there you go. Next thing that we will do in a separate video is we'll figure out how to incorporate this with a template with some custom CSS if you can't figure that out on your own. And we'll also use GitHub Actions in order to automatically build it.